welcome to the Joey Miller Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in today. You are in for a treat. We are going to be talking about victory, living a life of victory and overcoming. And we have a special guest on the podcast today who has exemplified that through life's trials, through challenges, through life's labels, that she has truly overcome. So I can't wait to introduce you to our guest today. Her name is Judy Logan. She's one of our champion families here at Champion Christian Center, and Judy has recently written a book. She's an author. She's a mother of 5. They have an Aussie doodle. They live in Bethel Park. Judy is a credentialed minister, and she loves all things to do with her family, food, fellowship, faith. If you know Judy for any time at all, she will soon become a dear close friend. And so it's an honor to have you on the podcast today, Judy.
Thank you, Pastor.
Yes.
Good to be here.
So great to have you. And I can't wait to discuss your book and your life story, because from the moment you shared it with me, I was like, this is going to be like a movie. This is so powerful. Just the story of redemption. And as you share your story with us and the listeners, they're going to hear just the redemption story of Jesus Christ throughout the whole story that you're going to share with us. So thank you for being transparent and vulnerable and sharing not only with us, but with everybody out there. You just recently wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, the book is about my childhood growing up, not knowing who I was, who I belonged to. A lot of different things just started to unravel during my teenage years. Things that I never knew was a big secret in my family. So just finding things out, it was a crazy adventure.
Yeah, the book is called The Unraveling.
Yes.
And you can get that on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. You can
Barnes
get
and
it,
Noble.
Yeah, Barnes and Noble. So check that out. If you're blessed by Judy's testimony, check out The Unraveling and share it with somebody. It's a great gift as well. So, let's open up just your story and your testimony of what God has done, what you have been through. Our theme at L Ministries, which is the women's ministry of Champion all year, is victory. And so we go into the verse in John where it says, in this life you're going to have troubles, tribulations, but it says, be of good cheer because I have overcome the world.
Yes.
And so, the story of Jesus through our overcoming and finding victory even when life seems unfavorable. And maybe you're listening today and you're like, man, if everything in my life had been different, then I could walk in victory. Or if my family was different, or if I had so many kids, or if I look like that, I could be happy, or I could walk in victory. And so really it's understanding that through Jesus Christ, he can change everything. He can give you joy, peace. He can bring purpose to your life. And so we're going to dive into your story, Judy, and talk through it a little bit for the listeners out there, knowing that you're going to be blessed as you hear Judy's story. So where do you want to start, Judy, with this whole unraveling story?
Well, I was thinking about the story of Moses, how Moses wasn't even supposed to be born, right? Pharaoh put out a decree saying that all firstborn baby boys are supposed to be killed. And so he was never supposed to be born, but, he was. And then he was hidden, and then he was given away. And during that time, he didn't know his identity. He was confused of, who he was and what God needed him to do. But then when he met God, God showed him that this is who you really are. This is your true identity. And, I'm going to use you for these things, to bring, God's people out. And I love that story because it reminds me of my own story, I was never supposed to be born. Different situations, different things happened in my past. And then I was hidden and I was given away.
Wow.
And so I just kind of appreciate that. And then when I found God, when I cried out to him, that's the key is you have to cry out to him because he's a gentleman. He's not going to force himself on you.
Right.
when I cried out to him before I even knew who he was and before I knew what faith was, every time I cried out to him, that just built my faith,
Yeah.
build my relationship with him. And when I did that, it brought me closer to him. And then I discovered who I truly was.
So good. So like Moses came into your identity. Well, let's unpack this a little bit. So you said, like Moses, you were not planned, you were hidden, you felt like you were unwanted, and really lost your identity. So let's go to the point in the story when you're a teenager, right? You've lived your life up to that point. And what was the conversation that was a pivotal conversation that changed your life?
Well, let me back up a little bit on that. You know, growing up, I was in a home that, it was supposed to be nurturing and caring, but for some reason, there was a lot of abuse, a lot of more verbal, mental abuse, and I didn't understand why. I was being labeled as, you know, um, not smart, ugly, not going to amount to anything. I was even called fat at one time, or actually a few times. And I thought, well, if these things are being spoken to me, then they must be true, right? I started to,
especially as a child, right? Because
yes,
you're receiving those labels from the people who you trust and who you love.
Yes, and I didn't understand why, and and there was a lot of comparison with my sister as well, but it was all just toward me.
So it was you and your sister and your parents.
Yes,
the household. Yeah.
Yes, and so it was very different growing up between the two of us, and I didn't understand why, and I thought it was my fault. It was me, so I just started blaming myself, and to the point where I was like, I can't do this. I can't stand anymore. If this person doesn't love me, if I don't belong here, then what am I doing here? And I just wanted to die. I just wanted to not be here anymore. If I wasn't loved by people that were supposed to take care of me, then what am I doing here? And that's when I started calling out to God. I grew up Catholic, and so I knew about the Bible. I knew about God and Jesus, but I didn't know that we can have a relationship with him.
So how old were you when you finally
when I was crying out to the Lord? It was like during my teenage years, like early teens, and a lot of chemical imbalances, hormonal things as you're growing up. So you're trying to find yourself, and so I was confused at that time as well, and I didn't know what else to do, and I felt hopeless, and I just started crying out to God. I'm like, God, if you're real, make tomorrow a better day. And I would just cry and cry and just.
So you're taking all this on your calling out to God, and then did the conversation happen that kind of revealed why everything was like it was? Or?
Well, later on, years passed. I guess this person couldn't hold the secret anymore, and just busted out and told me who this person really was and who this person was to me. At the point things just started to unravel in my life, one secret after another.
So the secrets, obviously, you're living your life, and then you find out in a matter of one conversation that everything is not as it seemed to be.
Right.
So take the listeners on the journey with us. How old were you when this conversation happened?
I think I was about 16 years old.
Okay.
Before I wrote my story, I buried it deep down because that was my past. I didn't want to live that anymore. I accepted Jesus, and so my whole life changed and everything. So I didn't want to remember that anymore. But when I told you my testimony, you're like, you got to write this book. I was like, oh, I don't want to dig that up. But God is so gracious, and the Holy Spirit just, he is the one who brought things out that, he wanted people to see, not to focus on, but to show where his goodness is, where his faithfulness was throughout my life. So every time that I called out to him, I didn't know whether he heard me. I didn't know whether he was real at that time. But he just brought me through. Looking back now, I'm like, he really brought me through all that.
So good. So for the listeners, they're like, what is the secret? Are you comfortable sharing with us how that all transpired?
Well, let me give you a riddle. I am I am the oldest child, a middle child, the youngest, three sets of parents, and I'm also an only child.
Yeah, that's quite possible? The riddle. I don't know. Listeners on there, figure that riddle out.
And none of them have been divorced.
Wow.
And they're all still married.
Wow. So piece that together for us.
Well, my biological mom and my biological father, they were already married. Well, my biological father was already married, and there was things in my life that my biological mother went through, which then I was the product of. Mm-hmm. But I was given to her sibling, so that's my other set of parents. Mm-hmm. I am the youngest in that set. In my biological mom, I am the oldest.
Okay.
And then with my father, I am the middle child.
Okay.
But I am also an only child because I was the product of that relationship. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, talk about being 16 and that being dropped on you. What were you thinking in that moment?
Well, first of all, everything just came to light when, when I found out that's why she was doing the things that she was doing to me. I don't blame her for that because, she was put in a situation that she didn't know how to handle either.
Yes. Now, when you're saying she, are you talking about your biological mom or
the mom that I was given to?
Okay.
Yes.
So your aunt.
Yes.
Really?
Yes,
okay.
My aunt. Yes.
And so she's the one that was kind of mistreating you. Yes. And okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that it wasn't because I don't think it wasn't because she didn't love me. I think it's because she was put in that position. She didn't know how to handle that situation. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. That's okay. We go through trials and errors, and it's all right that we do that. And if we seek God, then we can come to that conclusion that, hey, you know what, everything's going to be okay, because for what the enemy meant for evil and destruction, breaking up of families.
Yeah.
God just puts it all back together.
Right.
God puts it all back together, and just that love that I received from the Lord that I never knew about, I can give that love back.
Yes. Right.
Because if it wasn't for Him, I wouldn't be here.
Wow. Yeah. So you going through liking it to Moses' story, right? Moses finds out his true identity. He takes off to Midian. He's running. Just like a real shaking. And as you said, being 16, like your identity still being formed. You have all these labels from your aunt who you thought was your mom now. Yes. Kind of all of that damage that's going on with your identity. And then you find out the truth about the situation. So where does that leave you as a 16-year-old? You've received Jesus Christ at that point.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay,
not yet.
So where does that leave you? Did that lead into you crying out to the Lord?
Yes, every day I would like take my pillow and just scream in my pillow, and just even though I knew what the dynamics were at that time, things were still like wasn't right. It just wasn't right. Yeah. And I didn't want to exist. I tried to take my life several times. But God wouldn't allow it.
Wow.
As much as I wanted to not be around, God said no, because He had something else.
Wow.
I didn't have a purpose in my life. Again, my identity wasn't there. I didn't know who I was, especially after I found out. Like, I didn't know where I belonged. Mm-hmm.
You just kind of felt like out there.
Yes.
No firm foundation
to
stand upon.
No.
So did you call up your birth mom at that point?
Yes, I did. I asked, what happened, what was going on with that, and she told me that she was raped by someone else, and when she went through all this trauma, her family, her family members, her cousins. Everyone, they were very close. It was a very close family knit, and one took advantage of the other, and that's how I came about. But you know, she didn't care about her life at that time either. She didn't care what happened to her.
Going through her own
Going
issues.
through her own issues.
And
Yes.
yeah, I feel like as adults we can go through trauma, and especially teenage trauma. We're very inward focused, and then you go back and you look at it life through the full perspective of what that person was going through at the time as well,
Yes.
and it brings you understanding, it brings you perspective.
Yes.
So she was very much hurting.
Yes.
At the same time.
She was, and she didn't care anymore about herself. And like I said, we grew up Catholic, so she just knew of God, but she didn't have that same relationship until later on in life. And so she hated herself too. And when she found out that she was pregnant with me, she didn't want me. You know, she tried to do everything that she could to, you know, get rid of me. You know, she starved herself. She didn't go to the doctors or anything like that until the time, you know, it was to give birth.
Wow.
And so I was very malnourished. You know, she didn't want to eat or anything, and she didn't want me. But when I was born, she fell in love instantly, and she counted my, you know, fingers and my toes, and she said that, you know, that I was perfect.
Wow.
And you know, everything changed from there.
Yeah, and she gave you to her sister.
Well, she didn't really want to. My grandparents, her parents, because she wasn't married and because she wasn't in the right mind to take care of me, her oldest sister was already married, and just had a baby also, 9 months, you know, prior, and so my grandparents, you know, told her or made her give me up to them, and give me my name, my last name, and just kind of pretend that I was theirs.
Wow. So now, did you have a relationship with your birth mom growing up as if she were your aunt?
Yes, because my family is very close knit. All my aunts and uncles, my cousins were very close. So I grew up with her. I grew up with all my cousins.
And your birth father, was he in the picture at all at this time?
No. I remember he told me that he was there when I was born, but then after that, nothing more. Because that family tight-knit relationship just split up.
Yeah. Wow. So walk us through now, as the Lord's restoring and really doing a healing work in you from the point that you accept him as Lord of your life. And let's talk about this, because a lot of times we think, oh, you know, we ask Jesus into our life, now everything's just like poof, everything's and although now we're empowered to live and walk in healing and all of the good things that come with Jesus Christ, there is you know, there is a process that comes with that. And so a process that I'm sure you had to walk through with all of the feelings and all of the choices that you had to make from that point on, because that's what truly living a life of victory is. It's making the right choices to align with God's plan for your life, despite your pain, despite your baggage, despite your story, you know, to make decisions to say, I'm aligning with victory. So tell us a little bit about the decisions that you were left to make, and maybe how you might have struggled through that, but ultimately came out of it.
Well, like I said, I grew up Catholic, and I knew of the Lord, but I didn't know him. And every time I would just cry out to him and make, you know, the next day a better day, he would. But then in the evening, it would be like a whole nother story, you know, when my mom would come home and things would just happen all over again. And so I thought, you know, God, are you, you know, is this how you are? Like, 1 minute you're good, next minute you're bad. You know, I didn't know. And I didn't read a Bible because I didn't know that I was allowed to have a Bible. I thought it was just meant for the, you know, for the priests, you know, for just the holy ones, because we were too sinful, you know. But as I was walking through this and just kept on calling out to God, again, he saved me every time. And I didn't know him until I met my husband. And I'll be forever grateful for that, because he led me to the Lord. And when he led me to the Lord and told me that, yes, I can have my own Bible, then I started reading the word, but then I didn't really understand it because there was like a veil, you know, reading it at first. So he gave me a children's Bible, and I started reading the children's story. and then it just started, my eyes just started opening up. And then when I started reading the regular Bible,
Yeah.
adult Bible, I was able to understand, the things that God was saying in the Word, who I was, who I was meant to be, who He
Yes.
made me to be.
Yes.
I was created for more. He didn't orchestrate the ugly things that happened, but He does change everything, turn everything around for His good.
Yes, and coming
for
into the
our good.
realization that, of who you are, first of all, in
Mhm.
Christ, like
Yes.
all those other labels get stripped off
Yes,
of you, and
yes.
you take on His labels, what He says about you.
Yes.
And then understanding that your life has a purpose, that even though maybe it wasn't created out of ideal circumstances, God's protection was upon you with that plan and that destiny and that purpose, and that that you weren't a mistake, and
Right,
and that
right.
you were loved and wanted, and you are loved and wanted.
Yes.
And so, what a great reminder out there for our listeners, that if you had a moment where you're like, does my life count? Your story is a beautiful example of God watching over you, because there is a plan and a purpose for your life.
Yes.
And so, wow. So walk us through, the point of, you found out. Now, obviously, we're backtracking.
Sorry.
How does that change your dynamic in your family relationships? Now, what did Christmas look like?
Well, when everything was out in the open and everybody was fine with it, because even my cousins didn't know, but once everything was out in the open, we're just a loving family, and we just went on about our day and just accepted it, really. Yes. I think everybody was just like, okay, yeah, that's this is who you belong to, this is what happened, and everybody was okay with it. Yeah. For me, it was a learning process. It was a journey that I had to walk through, just day by day. Day by day. It wasn't easy. Sometimes people look at me and they think that, oh, she has it all together. She has a perfect family, beautiful kids, whatever. But that, the journey there was a rocky one.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do it without Christ.
That's so good.
I couldn't do it without Him.
Yes.
And His word, His promises, I had to hold on to that. Yeah. Once I knew what they were, I had to hold on to that. Even though, times, the enemy will creep up and say, oh, well, you're not worthy. You're not good enough. Remember your past. Remember what, you went through. But no, we are made victorious through Christ.
That's so good. And what a great reminder for anyone listening, that the enemy loves to come in with those lies. He loves to distort your identity. He loves to get you to believe a lie. And how important it is to really renew our minds with the word, that there is a hope, there is a future of who you are in Christ. And I love what you said, that what you have now is a product of you choosing to walk in victory every step of the way. And that victory, I'm sure, looked like renewing your mind over who God said, and forgiving. Yes. Let's talk a little bit for a minute about the forgiveness journey.
Forgiveness is huge, because if we don't have forgiveness in our heart, how can we love people? Yeah. And I've learned through the journey and through the process that, God tells us to forgive. He commands us to forgive. 127 times in the Bible, it tells us to forgive. Yeah. Because if we don't, then He won't forgive us. And in the past, I thought that I had forgiven everything, and everybody in my life. But there would be times that, little triggers that, sometimes my mom would say, or someone else in the family would say, I would be like, oh my gosh, that hurts. It still hurts. Like, those past memories would keep coming back. I'm like, why? I thought I'm over this. Well, it's like a porcelain vase. We're like a porcelain vase that when, things come against us and it shatters, we can put back the pieces together, right? The big pieces, we can glue them back together, and then it looks like it's okay. But what we don't see are the little shards, the little things, that the naked eye can't see, but God sees. God sees, and only He can put that back together. And if we choose to follow Christ, and I believe that's a number one thing, is that we have to make that choice, that we choose to follow him, that we choose to have him in our life, in our hearts, not just in our mind of knowing, yeah, I know God, but truly in our hearts.
Yeah.
When we do that, then we can learn to love. And if we forgive ourselves, I know that I had to learn to forgive myself for allowing those labels and those traumas, those hurts, those pains from my past. I had to learn to forgive myself and let go of those things. Because if I didn't, then I couldn't forgive the other people in my life. So when I was able to forgive myself, then I can turn around and forgive the people that hurt me. And when I was able to do that, then I was able to love them again. And because God loved me first, I'm able to give more love out.
So good. What a story of choosing to be in victory, not a victim.
Right.
Choosing to forgive, choosing to allow the Lord to heal and restore you. And let's fast forward. A couple years ago, you had a beautiful family reunion. What did that look like?
Yes. I went to the Philippines and visited my father, my biological father. We talked a couple of times on the phone in the past, but I went to visit him because he had a heart attack. And my godmother said, hey, maybe you need to call him, or, but in my heart, I just felt like I needed to go see him. But I didn't know how to do that because, his wife, my stepmom, had just found out not too long ago from that time about me. And of course, she didn't like that, which I don't blame her.
Right.
But, this is where we're at. And so I was able to go there, and it was like a fairy tale. My godmother didn't tell anyone that I was going to be there. And they just kind of planned it out with their oldest sister, my other aunt, to go and see him. And he was out of the hospital and everything already, recovering. And we went to their house. And my godmother and my other aunt talked to my stepmom and said, hey, she's here. She just wants to see her father and know him. And so the doors were open, and, I was there. He stood right in front of the door, and it's as if he saw a ghost.
Wow.
And, he was like touching my face, and he looked at me. He's like, just like mesmerized, really. And I had to tell him, I'm like, it's me, it's me, Judy. Yes. And he was like, oh my gosh. And he broke down, and he cried and cried and cried, and I cried, and it was beautiful.
Yes.
All the things that happened in the past, people think that they can't forgive, but they can.
Yeah.
They can. With Christ, you can do all things.
So good.
Even forgiveness.
Wow, I love that, because your decision to forgive opened up a grace then for restoration and healing, not only in your personal life, but in the relationships around you as well. And I love that, Judy. And you were such an example of, walking in that victory, walking in forgiveness, walking in your miracle, and seeing your life truly turned around and used for the purposes of God. And for your story, maybe someone out there is listening, they're like, I didn't have the ideal family. Well, welcome to the party. So that God can still work, he can still use you, he can still restore and bring those relationships back to the place of healing and unity. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for sharing your story of victory. Go buy her book, The Unraveling, on Amazon. Buy it at Barnes & Noble, and you will be blessed. We'll talk to you soon on the Joey Miller Podcast.